Welcome to Fuller Butz, a behind-the-scenes plastic surgery podcast. Yes, you heard that right. Join your co-hosts, Dr. Sam Fuller and Dr. Dan Butz, board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeons, on an exclusive full-access pass into the world of plastic surgery. Combining their expertise and training, Doctors Fuller and Butz will share medical insights, detailed explanations, and lighthearted humor to keep you entertained and informed. We're certain you'll become passionate about the plastic surgery specialty, and between debunking myths, uncovering truths, or just making you laugh out loud at their perspective on this creative and artistic field, we've got something for everyone. From tummy tucks to Botox and mommy makeovers to surgery do-overs, the Fuller Butz podcast will surely satisfy your podcast fix. All right, now let's dive into this episode.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Fuller Butz podcast. With me as always is my co-host Dr. Dan Butz from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm excited to be talking about some new technology. Should be, it's always exciting when kind of something new comes into the field, and I think there's been a lot of buzz around this one. So you want to tell our listeners what the topic is today?
Yeah, new year, new you. We are going to be discussing the brand new to the United States Motiva implant, which is over the past decade or so, have really had three manufacturers of breast implants, and there's now a fourth. It was recently FDA approved in this fall and is creating quite a buzz. And so over the last several weeks, Dan and I have been discussing the topic, and we wanted to at least sort of discuss the hype, discuss the facts, debunk some of the myths or the marketing ploys, and just give everyone an update on something that we are probably going to be seeing a lot of advertising of a lot of marketing of, which is the Motiva implant.
Yeah. So Sam, tell me real quickly, is this like a brand new implant? Is this, just come out, or how long has it been around for? What does it take to get an implant on the market?
So breast implants are the most heavily scrutinized FDA implant available. And so this has actually been around in the world outside of the US for over 14 years. And so there's been extensive studies, research that has been extremely promising. And over the last several years, several board certified plastic surgeons have performed research, evidence-based studies with these Motiva implants prior to FDA approval. So it's been in the US. There's been some patients undergoing these for studies, but it was not FDA approved ultimately until end of 2024. But this is not something that's brand new. It's been around forever. And the group is excited to be part of the US market and has a lot of technology, a lot of research to back up what they're showing us.
Yeah. So Establishment Labs is the company. They have a few other products out there as well, but this has kind of been their main thing over, again, in abroad in Europe, primarily, I think over 4 million implants. And they do have some unique differences. Maybe you want to start from, the outside in and kind of talk about the first kind of big difference from our traditional implants we've been using.
Yeah. So one of their terminology is called a smooth silk shell. And so what they've found through their research is that their shell has micro texture to it, actually 4 microns of texture. And that is in the middle between the previously used textured implants that were available and still are technically available to the US. But they're closer in similarity to the smooth implants, which is what we traditionally use. And so what they've seen and with evidence is that they are excited about how the body responds to this 4 micron textured smooth silk shell. It is classified under the FDA as a smooth implant, but with these micro textures, what they found at the cellular level is that there's significant less inflammation. So there's less reactivity to this implant, sort of creating this natural surface for the body to accept, adapt to, and essentially allow to stand within the breast without creating contractures, without creating significant inflammation, hardening, firmness, as opposed to other implants that may cause more reactivity to that. So their statistics are extremely promising as far as a low infection, low capsular contracture rate, and they believe, at least in part, that it's part of their smooth silk 4-micron technology. Dan, what are your thoughts on the
Yeah, I think it is pretty cool. And like, again, less reactive implant is going to be a good thing. Why we stopped using more aggressively textured implants was, that breast implant associated anaplastic large cell lymphoma, a very rare blood cell kind of cancer that was an overimmune response. So that texture was super rough. The goal of it was actually to kind of lock that implant in place, because they were often the teardropped implants. We didn't want that to rotate up around and move around. So we really needed the capsule to kind of fuse into it. For this implant, that's not the purpose of the texture. It's really to not be reactive. So that's why it is classified as a smooth device. And there's been no cases of that breast implant associated anaplastic large cell lymphoma, which is important to be aware of. You get 14 years of data. Normally that shows up at 7 to 8 years. So it's good to not have to worry about that, obviously. And then we don't really have numbers on this. Again, breast implant illness is kind of this vague thing, but in theory, a lot of patients who have autoimmune conditions baseline are kind of more concerned about that. This could be a new alternative that has less potential for your body responding to it. So I think that is a very unique thing that sets us apart. I think it's important to look like, capsular contraction is something we want to prevent, right? We have the whole 14-step protocol, which has drastically reduced those rates from what it used to be 20, 30% years ago to now, most companies are in the 1%. And so their rate though is 0.5, which is very low. So that's, again, 1%, 1.5 is close, but it's definitely better.
Yeah, so their rates of complication are extremely low, and that's one of the things that is very attractive. My scientific mind just was brainstorming as far as this 4 microns of texture, and why do we choose 4? Like, is 6 microns even better? Does that get down to 0.25? Like, should it be 2.5 microns? Like, I don't know, I just find it curious that the 4 microns was what it was decided on. And I'm not sure if they decided, if they actually tested all the different microns, or perhaps in the future there's yet another deviation to the textured implant in which a 4.75 micron might lead to even less complications. But these are just the nuances of the implant and the shell that's there. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Dan.
Yeah, I am, not to throw my brother out here, who's a bio kind of engineer, who's worked on some texturing. His thought process, they do test a lot of stuff, in the lab, in vitro, kind of seeing how cells attach and interact. And there's a lot of different texturing surfaces out there, but it also takes a lot of time and resources to get these things to the market. So and this one seems to kind of hit this sweet spot, but there certainly could be changes in the future. But it takes a lot of time to make changes to the shell that gets to actual human utilization. But yeah, it's pretty crazy what they're doing in the labs, kind of looking at this micron level interaction with fibroblast and all of this.
Yeah, to summarize, the first main, sort of unique feature of the Motiva implant is its 4 micron smooth silk shell. Textured implants, which is not the smooth silk, had been related to ALCL, as Dan alluded to. The smooth silk Motiva implant has had 0 cases of that, which is exciting and a wonderful complication rate at a very bar minimum, which is excellent as well. Next, let's go in deeper into the implant, and let's talk about the actual gel, the ergonomics of it, if you will. Dan, do you want to take over there?
Yeah. So when you look at kind of gel interactions, years ago, it was basically just free silicone inside this silicone gel, and they ruptured, they leak out, and kind of they were almost too soft, had no really structure to them. So over the last 10, 15 years, they started, maybe 2006, they started coming out with kind of more cohesive implants. That's when they started talking about these different generations of gel and how cross-linked the silicone is. That creates more structure, a little bit more firmness, keeps the gel where you want it. And if it does rupture, it doesn't really leak out like it used to, which is also great for safety. So this is kind of some of the marketing buzz. Motiva's kind of labeled their gels as 6th generation, but in reality, it's just a different level of cross-linking. and it's technically older than, say, the soft touch implant from Natrel, which came out about 7 years ago. But they do have two different gel types. They call them ergonomics, which you kind of alluded to there, and also round. And they react a little bit differently when you sit upright. The ergonomics is a little bit more natural or teardrop shape. The round kind of maintains more fullness up top. And when you look at kind of how these compare to Natrel, for example, which has 3 different gel types, then ergonomics is very similar to the soft touch, which again has a little bit more of natural appearance, but still gives you the upper pull fullness. I think some people, when they say naturally, like, well, I want some of that upper pull fullness, versus the cohesive, which is a little bit more round up top or maintains that. And then when you see it, in person, it kind of can see how that gel shifts. Feeling them, they feel similar. They both feel very natural, but everyone has a little bit different preference with that. So I think, again, it's nice having different options for patients depending on their preferences and goals. But I think I kind of take issue with the 6th generation, as it's really kind of claiming that it's a really new advent when really it's, been around for 14 years. And, it's a very good gel type, but just, kind of very similar to what we also have as well.
Yeah, the ergonomics and the gel itself, to me, it how they showed it in the videos and how I was kind of felt it in my hand and had the samples with it in the office. It sort of looked like a lava lamp, like as you sort of set it down and put it from upright to flat, it sort of slowly, the gel started to go kind of back down to a new position, as opposed to just kind of folding and flipping. And so I like the idea of these companies trying to make something that's very natural, as close to breast tissue, something that's not just going to like feel like a water balloon that's in there. And so I think while it's very similar to the implants that are available, it's worth mentioning that they are very excited about their ergonomics, or their gel technology, which is, I think patients have been very happy with and creates a very nice natural look.
Yeah, I mean, they feel great. And again, compared to what we had in the 90s, saline, very firm, not natural, kind of, you could almost feel the implant shifting in the body, to again, all these newer generation gels are just light years ahead, and that's why they're so popular. Which the other thing about these gels is also, having more cohesive, it's less, you mentioned folding, there's less likelihood that it folds on itself, which reduces the risk of rupture. So again, all these newer implants have, I think their rupture rate is 0.6%, 0.8%. I think, that the 4-year data is what a lot of the numbers we've been seeing for the FDA studies, but even some of their other studies in Europe, it's almost just as low at 10 years. Which is, again, great. I think traditionally we were telling patients expecting potentially 10% rupture rates. There was one study with a different company that had 23% at 10 years. So again, that older gel type compared to the newer ones is just dramatically better and better durability, better longevity.
Do you want to talk about to piggyback back the monoblock technology that Motiva is excited about?
Yeah, so another thing they talk a lot about is kind of their gel to shell interface, what they call a monoblock. They're really trying to make sure it's all working together. Like you're kind of alluding to, it kind of moves in one piece. It's because the gel is kind of very interlocked or monoblocked kind of together. And all the newer implants kind of do have some sort of interface. Again, they talk about differently. In the clinic, oftentimes we kind of pinch and try to see how you can separate that off. Clinically, you're not ever able to do that once it's in your body. Obviously, that's a good thing. You want that to be really well kind of locked together. So again, it's moving together, lower risk of rupturing because that shell isn't folding or rippling or kind of doing anything weird. So again, they're monoblock. I don't know the exact science behind it, but it does seem to stick quite nicely to the gel inside.
Yeah, they're, how it was pitched is that instead of having this empty silicone shell that's just filled with a different silicone gel, it's sort of like all produced, manufactured as a single entity, which keeps it to be cohesive in and of itself. And, coining the phrase, this monoblock technology certainly allows us to discuss that with our patients. We are not trying to say that this is the latest and greatest, best thing since sliced bread, but they do offer some interesting features that are important for us to educate the viewers and prospective patients.
Yeah. The other thing they like, the blue seal, that's kind of Blue steel, blue
Blue
steel.
steel? Oh, I thought you said blue steel.
um, if you look at the implant, it has this pretty kind of blue tint to it, hue, and they kind of, again, I don't know how they exactly do this. There's a little blue lining on the inside. So if it's what this is really when they're taking it off the line, if there's ever that lack of it, they know that the implant is not doesn't have integrity. It's ruptured or there's some issue with it. It gets peeled off, and if we were to open up the implant in the OR and it's not blue, we send it back and use a different one. So it's kind of nice to have that little visual reminder. And again, it's kind of, it also looks kind of nice too. But.
Yeah, the way that I thought about it and the way it was presented to me is that, when you're in the factory creating these implants, you have the internal ergonomics that, that gel that's there. And then when you're trying to encapsulate it, you're trying to protect it. This is a safety feature that they are trying to really limit the number of failures that get out to the market, is that you have to encase the gel of the implant 3 times with 3 layers. And so they place 1 layer on it, and then that intermediate layer has a blue tint to it. And so they place that down, and then they place the 3rd and final. And so if there's any leak, if there's any blue that's leaking out, then they know that has failed their shifts of barriers that are keeping that gel that's supposed to be on the inside there. And so they've at least the reps in northern Indiana have been excited because they're quoting a certain number of implants that they are sending back and saying, hey, this did not pass the blue seal testing in their factory. And so they're curious to see, how many are actually failing that safety test and that check-in before they're being delivered to the market. And so just another safety feature. I think that all of the modern implants that we're using are extremely safe. They're extremely tested and scrutinized by the FDA and everybody else. But this is something that really does, make it a almost a operate by color sort of thing, where if you open it up and things look not the way that it's supposed to, then that this is not a good implant. So at least gives you that extra confidence, even though that's probably an extremely, extremely unusual situation where there would be a manufacturing error.
Yeah, these things go through strenuous testing. I'm not, when they build an implant, they make the shell first and then they fill it, and then they have that seal on the back. And so after that sealed, it goes through a lot of stress testing to make sure everything's intact. I think it's important. I think that's where a lot of this marketing buzz. It's like, oh, these numbers are so great, but and they are very good numbers. But the numbers in general for breast augmentations are very good, right? Like capsular contraction rates are very low. Infections are just across the board extremely low. That's nothing really unique about this implant. And a lot of this is thanks to a lot of these newer techniques we use, really no-touch technique, which Motiva kind of has always been in the realm of no-touch technique, which is probably partially due to their just generally low cap con rates. If you look at some of the newer data that Natrel has since they've released kind of their updated line about 9 years ago, their cap con rates are, what is it? I think 1%. So not 0.5%, but not if you look at the paperwork, we often show patients, it says like 26% because it's from some study 30 years ago. And kind of rupture rates, we often discuss being 7 to 9%. And again, this 9 and 7 year data for like soft touch is 0.1% at 7 years. So these are really good numbers, for these, these 2 competing companies, both have been kind of at the forefront of the technology, having the different gel types. So I think it's important to really compare apples to apples and not say, oh, look at this study from 30 years ago.
So to dumb it down to like the everyday person, you're not necessarily saying, oh gosh, I'm going to scrutinize over 0.1% versus going to read the 30-year-old study myself, is that all of these implants that we're using are extremely scrutinized. They're all extremely safe. The outcomes are wonderful. And I think Motiva is no different. So I think that this is an exciting new option. And I think it's to be determined what potential is the best patient or best candidate for this. Is it someone who is better for in reconstructive options for breast cancer? Is it something for a subfascial approach versus a behind the muscle or under the muscle technique. I think those are the nuances where, as we're seeing our patients undergo these surgeries with all having, great outcomes, are there going to be different nuances and different alterations to, how we place, the internal bra, the length of the incision, the recovery. And I think that's, for each surgeon to really see and watch their patients over the first few years of incorporating a new device, a new technology, a new implant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, again, it's all about trying to provide our patients with the best options. I try not to be a one-trick pony, so trying to really just know why I'm doing something and giving them the different options. I've used a couple of them already. The patients love them. They look great. They feel great. But I don't know if it's all the other examples are also great.
Most of your patients are very happy and
right. It's not like this is going to make a big shift, but it's nice to have options, especially for some of those. Again, the patients who are a little bit more nervous about the reactivity or autoimmune stuff. And I think with the shift to more subfascial, that's where these have been used. I think a lot. It's more common in Europe and abroad. Their sizes are a little more limited, and they have plenty of them, but there's not quite as many. So they've tended to be kind of in the smaller space, but good. It's good to have competition in this arena, new competition to drive companies to work harder, spend the money on research and development to provide better options and
and I think
better results.
They've spent the money in the R&D to develop a blue seal technology for patient safety for no other reason, but really just to ensure that the implant's intact. And of course, they're going to market that. They have an extended quality warranty like the other companies, and then they have a newer shell that's close to a smooth, but has a little bit more micron or texture to that at the 4 micron level. Their smooth silk shell. Implant gel, Dan has gone into depth with as far as the ergonomics, the monoblock technology, and that kind of just wraps up Motiva implants in a nutshell. We just wanted to discuss it, overview it. If you guys have questions, certainly send them over to us. But we're excited to have this as an option for our patients and our practices.
Yeah, it's a great review. Thanks for diving deep. Blue steel.
Yeah, thanks for all the research, all the studies, the percentages. That was very impressive.
Got a little nerdy. All right, we'll talk soon.
All right, see ya.
Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of Fuller Butz, a behind-the-scenes plastic surgery podcast. Doctors Fuller and Butz are so appreciative of your time and attention. We invite you to subscribe, share, and continue to enjoy our plastic surgery perspective. Feel free to reach out on Instagram at either @FullerSurgeryMD or @DanielButzMD. That's Butz with a Z for comments, suggestions, and support. Remember, be artsy, stay scientific, and make life fun. We hope you'll join us again on the next episode of Fuller Butz.